There we go. All right. Paul is writing this letter to the congregation at Colossae. The congregation had likely been planted by a man named Epaphras. That's right. He came at the end of our class. We had that, who had first been taught by Paul. So it's just interesting that Paul's connection to the Colossians is so great, and he was not the founding pastor there. He is not the one who actually established that church, which is rather unique and different for Paul. The issue that they were struggling with was the ideology that Jesus Christ was a godly man, but he was not God. Is that such an unusual thing today? That ideology is still out there, isn't it? He was a good man. He was a prophet. He was a rabbi. He was a great teacher. Anything else you can think of? I mean, these are all things that we hear people say, but when you try and make the impression that not only was he all of those things, but he literally was God in the flesh, no, people are going to put up their hands on that one. And the thing of it is that if he was not God, then he was not a good teacher, and he was not a good rabbi, and he was not a good person, and he was not any of those things except for maybe a crazy man. Because he says that he is God, and he puts himself on the same level with God. And he, all of those things that he says about himself, if those are not true, then you can't say that he was a prophet and all of that. So it has to be one way or the other. And of course, we recognize that he was indeed God. Okay, Gnosticism, that's something that maybe a lot of us haven't heard about. But it is out there. It's the belief that you must have. Say it again.
Secret and special.
Okay, secret and special is good. Who else?
Divine spark.
Good. Divine spark.
Enlightened.
Hidden
knowledge.
Hidden knowledge is good.
That's right.
Anyone else?
Personal experience.
Personal experience. An external spiritual experience. Something that feeds into you that no one else has. That's what they're looking for there. And so the danger for that is extreme. Do we see that today? Absolutely, right? There are plenty of people out there who have literally established denominations based on the fact that they had a special experience that no one else had. The most, the one we think of all the time is, of course, Joseph Smith, who has the Latter-day Saint revelation that completely reforms everything that had come beforehand. Everything that was in the Bible, it completely reforms that. And a brand new book, The Pearl of Great Price, is written by a man who received a revelation from golden tablets. Well, if that experience is what you present to people, then obviously look at the size of the Mormon religion. I'm going to Kauai tomorrow, and the Mormon religion is the biggest religion on the island of Kauai.
Wow.
It's just amazing to me. And so look how far-reaching that is, and how many people want to believe that you got something really special. Because what does that do? That is that enforcement that God is real, because he spoke to Ramona. Well, that God is real because he left his word for us to establish. And whatever he says to Ramona may not be what he says to Marilyn, may not be what he says to Marie. You know what I mean? If it's coming from you. And so we have to be so extremely cautious of that. So Gnosticism, that's sort of just the basics of what that is. One of the areas that was included in Gnosticism was the worship of angels. And we talked about that, about the fact that is something that still goes on in multiple religions today, the worship of angels. There are some religions that even believe that people die and become angels. And so we have to know that's not true. Angels are created beings. They're a completely separate entity than human beings. no one dies and gets wings, no matter how many bells ring. And you just don't. That's just not the way it is. But human beings are made in the image of God. And so we're a completely separate thing. But many religions use these messengers of God and actually pray to them and worship them as part of their worship. Part of that Gnosticism, that special attachment. How is that any different than those we read about who went to the temple of Artemis or Aphrodite and worshipped there in all kinds of unique and bizarre ways so that they could have an attachment to the God of their choice? It's just kind of bizarre. So we talked about in number 4, are there religious groups today who still hold to that belief and why that goes against spiritual teaching? Does anyone have anything else to add on that question?
The belief that the people, angels, and gods with a small g are a progression that someone might walk through. I hadn't really heard that before, where somebody might become an angel and then become a god. I mean, I've heard people say they could become a god, but that was interesting.
Yeah, as if you do enough good things, then you kind of get promoted to one of these other things. And if I'm not mistaken, that not necessarily the same thing, but that's kind of the same thinking as a purgatory, right? So you go and you kind of get refined in purgatory so that you can kind of step up to the next level of what it is. And that's a very humanistic thing to believe, right? So it kind of covers all your bases. Just in case you haven't quite made it to where you need to be, then there's going to be some extra time to kind of work on your game. Right? All right. Number 5, Paul wants the believers in Colossae to understand that Jesus Christ is supreme in every area of their life. That's the entire reason that he's writing to them. Chapter 1 will clearly let them know that Jesus Christ is supreme in the church. Okay, how is he supreme in the church?
He's the head.
He's the head and the body, right? We're comprised of the body. We're baptized into the body. He's everything. He is the entire entity of the church. Chapter 2 teaches that the entirety of the universe is Jesus Christ is supreme. So as far as everything that there is that has been created. Chapter 3 teaches that Jesus Christ should be supreme in every area of our personal lives as well as in our families. And remember the instruction to wives and to husbands and to children and to slaves and to masters. I mean, every possible area of family he gives direction on. And no matter where you're at on that line, Jesus is supreme of you. So he's supreme in the family and supreme in the heart. Heart is good. Community is the word I'm actually looking for there. So not only supreme in our families, but supreme in our secular communities and in every area of our lives. He supersedes everything. Remember the scripture that talks about he sets up kings and takes down kings. Sets up presidents and takes down presidents. Sets up those who are in charge of us, takes them down. Why would he do that? I think I just lost my necklace. Sorry, excuse me. So sorry. Oh gosh. If you could put a little flag over that. Why would he set up someone and then take them down? Because he's God. That's the perfect answer. Another practical reason?
Well, they fail him.
Because they fail him, or because he simply can, and because they accomplish his purposes while they're in there. And all you have to do is read the Old Testament, look at Saul first. He set Saul up because they threw a stinking fit and wanted a king, and he put Saul in there, but then eventually Saul gets taken down by the Lord. Saul says, that's it. God says, that's it, Saul. You're done. Every single king in the northern kingdom is put into place by God. Every single one of them is evil. Every single one is taken down. The southern kingdom doesn't fare too much better. They have a couple of good kings that come in and lead the people well, but they are all taken out. And yet God allows these evil people to come in, and he allows them the authority to rule and reign his people, no less, the people of Israel, because they're accomplishing whatever plans and purposes need to be accomplished at that time. But the difference is he always, always, always sends someone to speak to them and make sure that someone always has the truth, a prophet. Someone, a godly man who comes in and speaks to them and gives them the opportunity to follow in his way. All right, so number 6, Paul wants this letter to the church in Colossae to be shared with another congregation as well. Which congregation was that? Laodicea. He says, make sure you share this with them. And what was this congregation known for?
Been lukewarm.
Lukewarmness.
Lukewarm. Okay, so you find that story in Revelation 3, that letter to Laodicea is in Revelation chapter 3 when he says, you're not hot, you're not cold, you're lukewarm. We talked about the water situation and why that would be so interesting in Laodicea. And I love the fact that God always uses things that people can relate to. 7 and 8 may have been unfair because I'm not sure we touched on it much. So if it doesn't sound familiar, it's not you, it's me. Paul will write another letter at the same time as he writes Colossians. Which letter is it?
The one to the Laodiceans?
No. Philemon. He writes those at the same time. In fact, they're both hand carried at the same time back to the church there. And so they're carried at the same time. And here's where I don't think we talked about it. Why does Paul spend part of his time discussing slaves and masters' behavior towards one another in chapter 4 of this book? Did anybody know this? Because I don't think I talked about it.
Is it that kind of the same thing with the lukewarm water? They understood that system of slave and master.
Sure, yeah, that's absolutely true. But there is a little even more specific thing, because when we get to the little book of Philemon, you're going to see that is about he's writing that to a slave owner. And he's saying, your slave who ran away from you has been so helpful to me. And so I'm asking you to treat him with kindness when he returns to you. And if you will, send him back to me, because I could really use him. But I'm going to make him come back to you because he's your slave and he should not have run away. And so he's putting that proper perspective of slave owners and slaves, and what does he want? And he's saying, I could really use him if you will send him back. And so it goes with number 8, who will carry this letter back to the Colossians?
To Tychicus?
Yep, that's that. I don't know how to say. Tychicus. That sounds about right. Yep. I know how to spell it, just not say it. And the other person that's going to accompany him is Onesimus. And Onesimus is the slave that Paul is sending back to Philemon, and the one that he would love to have come back to where he's at. So that whole principle of slave owner and slave is really prevalent right now. It's what Paul's thinking about, and so he uses it in that. Now, some people are really upset about the fact that Paul doesn't just simply say, slavery is wrong, we shouldn't have slaves, and condemn it. They think that maybe if he had done that, maybe the Civil War thing wouldn't have all happened, and maybe that wouldn't have come about. But that wasn't the purpose here, was it? Slave owners and slaves were part of the life, whether they were right or wrong at the time. It was part of the life, and so the principle that Paul gives is how to be a good slave owner and how to be a good slave. Now, isn't that just bizarre when we stop and think about it? But there are even godly principles for that. And so it's kind of like when there were multiple wives in the Bible. That was never God's plan for it, but God gives clear direction on what wives are to expect from their husband and to be provided for. And so not that he condones having multiple wives, but if you do have multiple wives, here's how you need to treat them. Did you have something, Holly?
Well, I was just thinking that it emphasizes how all Christians have the same responsibilities of submission to Christ no matter their lot.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like that matched a lot of the, messages he had about family and community and things like that.
Absolutely. Do the very best that you can with wherever you are at in that. Very good. All right.
Turn that off. Turn this off.
Bye.